So the case is slowly being built against sitting. There's a higher increased risk of diabetes, cardiovascular events, and death from cardiovascular causes just by sitting during the day, 8 hours. A recent study in the American Journal of Epidemiology said that even if you exercise for that 1 hour before you go to work, it doesn't undo the damage caused by sitting during the day. In fact, it's what you do during the day that makes a difference. So on a hierarchy, I would suggest being able to move in your office environment is the ultimate way to avoid problems from sitting. If you can't move during the day, you can't walk, you can't put a treadmill by your desk, then having an adjustable desk is a great solution, one that goes up and down. But I realize for the vast majority of you, having an adjustable desk just isn't an option either. And so most of you will be forced to sit in your chair. So here I'm going to discuss some ways of tweaking the environment so that your chair becomes a less dangerous place to be. Also, it's worth remembering that the body adapts to the stimulus or stresses you put into it. So if I was to do weights, my body would get stronger. But if I just sit, my body will adapt to this position. My hip flexors will shorten, my back muscles will get weaker, my quads and the lower aspect will lengthen slightly. So I'm adapting to the sitting position. And for 40 hours a week, or whatever it is I work, my body is saying, yep, I'm getting good at this. I am a sitting athlete. But then the weekend comes along and I start playing soccer, or I go skiing, or I do some sort of activity that weekend warriors do that my body hasn't got the training for during the week. And so injuries can happen. So these exercises or these chair-based movements can actually help that. So if we look at tweaking the environment I'm sitting in, my knees are 90 degrees, my hips are 90 degrees, my back could be slightly flexed, or if I've got good posture, my back would be sort of in neutral spine, I suppose. The tasks I'm doing are going to be reaching for the telephone, onto the keyboard, looking, perhaps talking with some colleagues. So I need a certain amount of upper body movement here. I want to now look at what we can change. So we can change the way the feet are, we can change the pelvis, and we can move the back. So simply the first thing to do is just move the feet a little wider apart and drop the knees in. This is going to create a stretch around your hips. Very simple. Now we bring the feet together and drop the knees out. Again, that's going to create a little change through the hips, putting one foot forward, putting one foot back. So all that's pretty self-explanatory. But if I was to bring a little step into work, I would be able to flex my hips a little bit more. For example, if my hips aren't much more flexible than 90 degrees, i.e. if I can't bring them up much beyond 90 degrees, I'm sitting almost at the end of my range of motion for 8 hours a day. And that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing because it can affect the ligaments around the hip. And also it can drive the spine back into a flexed lumbar curve, which can affect the lower back. But if I was to slowly increase movement in my hips, that would be a good thing. So bringing in a step and putting one foot on the step to create more flexion in one side whilst keeping the flexion less in the other will slowly change the mobility of my pelvis. And so throughout the day I could keep this here for 10 or 15 minutes and then change it to the other side. And moving the step out slightly and putting my leg on it at an angle here would also open up some of the muscles on the inside of my legs, my adductor muscles. So moving on from positions of the feet, I can also position the pelvis. I've got here a very simple yoga wedge, and the wedge is made of a sort of a plasticky type foam. And so if I was to put this behind me onto my sit bones, my ischial tuberosities, I could rock the pelvis forward, creating a good lumbar lordosis. And you can see how in the mirror here behind me, how I'm now automatically sitting more upright from simply putting a wedge under my pelvis. If I put it onto one side, I can take pressure off a sore back on one side, which would be, so my pelvis here is just rocking like this, so I'm lengthening this side and compressing this side. And then if I was to do that the other side, I would have the opposite movement. So sometimes it's just good to vary the stimulus going through into the pelvis. Also, if I was to shift one hip forward and shift one hip backwards, now my pelvis is pointing at this angle, but my feet are still pointing this way. Again, a completely different stimulus through all the feet, through the hips. So moving up from there, we've got the arms and the chest. So simply just moving the head is going to be a nice stretch, as probably most of you know. So rotating from side to side, dropping one ear down, perhaps even just slightly pulling here, stretching the scalene muscles. But also I can think about moving my chest bone 45 degrees this way and then 45 degrees this way. And I get a really nice rotation through my back when I do that. I could also think about dropping one hand down through here and then rotating the chest as well. And so I'm combining now two movements, a rotation and a side bending. Also, bringing my thumbs forward like this and putting them down to my side. If I bring my thumbs back, I'm bringing my shoulder blades in together like I'm pinching my shoulder blades. That enhances my lumbar curve and extends my back. But if I now turn my thumbs inwards and let my back flex, I go from kind of a poor posture to a good posture. And if I vary the speed of this movement, I can actually get some really nice workout through my spine, flexion, extension, moving it around. Combine that with some rotation and some of these side bendings, and I've got a really nice three-dimensional spinal workout. Going back to the hips, we can change the position of the hips with stretches as well. If I just move slightly to the side of my chair, I can bring this hip all the way back, so I have a nice straight hip now, and I'm getting a good stretch in my big toe, getting a nice stretch in the front of my hip, and I can still operate a computer or answer a phone from this position. Same goes for the other side. Through here, I'll just show you from a different angle. I just drop that knee back. That's going to prevent my hip flexors from getting tight, which is one of the main causes of the back pain later on during the day. So I hope you find some of these exercises useful. I would use a combination of all of these if I had to sit all day, and I would constantly be changing the stimulus my body has so that come the weekend I am more flexible and I have more range of motion. But more importantly, during the day, I will be getting up at any opportunity I can to reverse the effects of sitting and cut down my risks of getting any diabetes or cardiovascular events. I hope that's not too depressing, but try and exercise at the chair as much as possible.